Welcome to The Evidence-Based Marketer, a podcast focused on the science of marketing with a special emphasis on financial services. Whether you're looking to grow your business or provide a better client experience, we focus on how you can use data and research and time-tested strategies to be a more effective marketer.
Welcome to this episode of The Evidence-Based Marketer. Today, we're going to focus a little more on the visual side of things. In this episode, we're going to look at creating better branding in imagery. I'm Andrea Loyne, Digital Marketing Specialist here at Symmetry Partners.
I'm William Chettle, Director of Experience and Engagement, and we are going to dive in today with a special guest. This is a first for us here at the Evidence-Based Marketer. Mikhael Frazier, our Director of Creative, well, he's really our creative genius here at Symmetry. He's done all the sort of branding and marketing here, and is really in charge of the visual side of everything we do. And so, Mike, welcome.
Please, I prefer brand cop. But thanks for having me.
Every day we're bombarded with images. I mean, people see thousands of ads every week, and primarily your experience of the world is a visual one. And, you know, especially in our industry, financial services, there's a lot of generic imagery. And one of the challenges you have is that, you know, no one knows what a stock looks like. And so a lot of it becomes very sort of symbolic. Now, if you make widgets, your challenges are a lot fewer. You just need to take the best pictures you can of your widgets. Not as easy in services, the service businesses like ours. So how do you think about branding and imagery when you are dealing with something like financial services, when you're dealing with any kind of service that doesn't necessarily have a direct visual embodiment?
I mean, it is quite a bit trickier than other businesses where you have a product to feature. One of the key things is focusing on communicating what the experience is going to be for your client. So obviously, as you pointed out, you can't show what a stock or an ETF is, but you can show kind of what the experience for your client's going to be, the value that you're going to be providing to them, whether it be financial advice or, you know, whatever experience or a service that you're trying to deliver to them.
When you look at a brand, you're just out there in the world and you see a logo. How do you think about it? How do you sort of make that determination? This is good, bad, mediocre. Here's what I would do if this were my brand to improve it. What's your sort of decision process? Because I think for a lot of people, they might feel this intuitively, but you're probably, I think, able to articulate it better than a lot of us.
You would assume so, but but a lot of it is really how it makes you feel. I mean, a lot of branding and design really is about making the audience feel something, feeling a connection to the brand. And there's a lot of little ways to do that. It's color selection, image selection. So, you know, for example, you're using the color red. A lot of people have a connotation of associating red with love, things like that. I mean, like it can give you a warm, fuzzy feeling, or the color blue can convey a sort of steadfastness, that kind of thing. So it really is about conveying an emotion and making a connection with the client base you're trying to reach.
But at the same time, you also have to be aware of what's kind of on trend, don't you?
Right.
Because
yes,
like every year, the Color Council releases the color of the year, and for 2021, it was ultimate gray. And suddenly, when this is out there, you start seeing lots of ultimate grays. You see ultimate gray cars. You see people wearing ultimate gray sweaters, and often it's a strong choice. A few years ago, it was Malabar, which is kind of a sort of cinnamony brown, and you had a brief, bunch of Malabar sweaters, and then everybody put them in their closets and never took them out again or gave them to Goodwill. So how do you think about, so there's what's durable, what's on trend, and what should companies be thinking about?
And to piggyback off what he just said, how often should they really look at the colors in their brand? Is it something that should be annual, or should they look at it over time? No.
I mean, bringing up the whole annual color section, color of the year thing, I mean, these are companies and associations that this is their bread and butter. They have a vested interest in naming a color of the year because then they can sell you mugs and various other things that feature this color of the year.
Sweaters.
The Pantone branded sweater, yeah. It's like you don't want to change your brand colors yearly. that's typically the typical shelf life of a brand is probably about 5 years. So, I mean, like what you want to do is when you're making those decisions about your strategy, about your branding, and all the components of the brand, the logo, imagery, et cetera, you make those decisions and you set those things. That doesn't mean they can't shift slightly over time as like you put the brand out into the world, but they're not something that you should be changing every year. And as far as trends go, to address that, trends are something you should be aware of, certainly cognizant of, but you shouldn't chase trends. And if you do choose to lean into something that is a trend, you should, A, be very aware of that and be ready to shift because, something that is trendy right at this moment, a year from now, may not be.
Also depends on your business, right? Some businesses where being trendy is critical.
Yeah.
And some businesses where being trendy is just going to get you in trouble.
Right. I mean, like if you're in the fashion industry, obviously paying attention to trends and reflecting trends is very relevant to your business and your success. But if you're selling,
financial services,
yes,
Any kind of service.
Then it can kind of just look sad and cloying if you're trying to work a brand into to your clients and the way you present yourself.
But I think the 5-year rule is good. I've often thought about brands as being like hamsters. Like in the wild, hamsters live about 3 years. If you take really good care of your hamster at home, you get to about 5 years. And so, for a brand, you don't want an old hamster. And so you just need to have that kind of mindset. Now, as you said, you don't need to destroy it. You don't need to start all over. You can also just evolve it. Now, with Symmetry, for example, we've done certain interesting things with the brand, which you might want to talk about over the last couple of years. And they were tweaks, but they helped us stay more current, more fresh, more modern without doing a wholesale sort of demolition and start over again.
Well, and you want to stay recognizable. One of the big things is building a brand that over time people recognize and trust, which is a big deal in the financial industry. You want to gain trust. So if you completely tear it down and start over, people have to relearn your brand and trust your brand, and then they'll come back.
Right. You can do a lot of damage to yourself if you change too much. There's lots of examples of very big, notable companies, Pepsi, MasterCard, Gap, that have changed too much, and people had a very visceral emotional reaction to those changes. And in most of those cases, the companies immediately went back to their tried and true logo or brand identity. So you have to be very mindful when you're making any sort of change. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to tweak it and evolve it and make it feel contemporary, but still you.
Mm-hmm. So could you talk about some of the little things you did over the years just to freshen up Symmetry without, making a major change?
Sure. Well, I mean, going back to our last brand, our last rebrand, we went through a major rebranding probably 10 years ago at this point. We engaged with an agency. They came up and set what the brand was. But in most cases, when that brand is actually applied to the real world, you come up with all of these little situations where what the ideal that is set forth at the beginning, it doesn't really work in every situation. So you begin to tweak it and evolve it in subtle little ways. One thing that I can think of from that last time was we had these particular visuals that
goldfish. For the folks who are not familiar with the Symmetry brand, lots and lots of goldfish with weird white writing on them.
And flowers.
Yeah, there were these like little lines all over these associated with these images that were supposed to be, I think, unique intelligence lines. They were supposed to convey something special about this object. But so that was great when it was pitched to us, and and it was set. That was great. But then once you go out into the real world, it's like, oh, we have to launch a new product, or we have to make communications that come up with new versions of these. And we realized very quickly that those were burdensome to come up with. They took a lot of time, a lot of effort, and they just didn't allow us to move nimbly. So then we sat back and kind of figured out ways to still have those present in our brand for like those main products, but to not use them everywhere, to use them very sparingly.
And eventually we phased them out.
Yes.
Yes. And phasing out is not a bad thing. There's an interesting story about eBay. Now, eBay used to have, as part of their identity, they had sort of a big gray background, which they hated. And if they had suddenly one day gotten rid of the gray background, they thought there'd be a lot of people complaining because people get used to things. So what they did is they faded out the gray background over 30 days. Each day they made it a little lighter and a little lighter until at the end of the month, it was gone completely. And I don't think they heard anybody protest. Nobody was upset. So it's not a bad way to go if you have the time and patience. For example, this is insider baseball, but Symmetry has part of its logo is a very long line between the two M's in Symmetry. One of the things we are very slowly doing is shortening that line, and we're going to shorten it and shorten it and shorten it until the line disappears.
I'm really surprised you exposed that strategy.
If you're listening, let's keep it between us.
But it's that kind of mindfulness that I think it's one option, because sometimes, especially in more conservative arenas like financial services, big change can be kind of threatening. People get used to things, and so you don't want to just upset it all at once.
And kind of contrary to that, we're working with a firm now that did break every rule that we just talked about. They rebranded themselves completely, but they did it on purpose. There was purpose behind it. They had changed their entire process. They changed their entire view, and they were targeting a completely different client. So they did start over, and they came up with a new brand, and they have worked to get it out there in the world. So yes, you don't want it to happen. You don't want to tear it down until, okay, maybe sometimes you do need to tear it down.
I agree. I think the sort of way to think about it is, can this brand be saved?
Right.
and can we evolve it in certain ways that get us to a more contemporary, fresh, clean look? Or based on what our business is, who our clients are, what we've become, do we just need to start anew? Mm-hmm. And there are no wrong or right answers. You just need to be mindful and make good choices based upon the answers to sort of where you are and what you're trying to achieve.
Right. It's important on that one.
Yeah. I mean, I think the most important thing is being mindful and doing it purposefully and not just in sort of a knee-jerk fashion.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'm sure you've seen this, and maybe you could talk about some of the mistakes that you've seen over the years when it comes to branding. I mean, one thing that always strikes me is people just pick something because it looks cool, and there's no story there. It's not connected to their business. It's not really connected to what ideally their brand would be, but it's a cool looking logo.
Well, you've all often brought up the example of the financial advisor who worked with widows, but his college colors were orange, and he liked orange, and Halloween was his favorite holiday, so he made this website of all orange and black, and it didn't really vibe well with his target client. So you got to think about that stuff.
Yeah. So what are some mistakes, or maybe sort of best practices to keep in mind, and things and mistakes to avoid, as you've seen over the years?
Well, the best practice thing, when you're going through any sort of brand evolution or brand rebrand, you want to keep the focus on your client. It's not about you. So in that example about the advisor and integrating his college colors, listen, we all have favorite colors, but it doesn't mean that they're going to resonate with the client base you're trying to reach. So that's the biggest one. Just as hard as it is, put your ego to the side and think about who you're trying to do business with, and keep them front of mind with all of your decision making. As far as mistakes go, most of the most obvious mistakes I've seen across my time doing this have been mistakes in in terms of tweaking logos. A lot of companies, like I think Airbnb was a really egregious example I can think of. A few years ago, they decided they were going to rebrand. They came up with this new logo. I believe they engaged an agency on it and pushed it out to the public. Now, on the face of it, none of that's bad. They had a reason why they were doing this. They wanted to show up in a new way to their clients. But in the execution of that, they put a logo out there that many equated to look like the anatomy of a woman. So not the best look. And that's something that could have been avoided by what I like to say, run it through the 13-year-old boy filter. Anything before you push it out into the world, be at your most immature and look at it honestly before you share it with anyone. Or just like find a group of trusted colleagues to share it with.
Or trusted 13-year-old boys.
Exactly. But
because if they can make it funny and crude or ridiculous, they will. And
100%. And it's a black eye that they could have avoided and that you can certainly avoid just by giving it a little thought. I understand a lot of times you get excited because you have a final product and you want to share it, but you really do have to be mindful before you push it out into the world.
Yeah, I think it's important that you get feedback from colleagues, feedback from peers, just to make sure before you put it out there. It's the message you want to convey.
Yeah.
And, on the other side, of course, sometimes and this is a harder thing to be aware of, but a lot of times people just have really super boring logos. And look, if you are in financial services in the service industry, you're not selling a retail product. You can only win so much with your logo. You could have you could be an accounting firm with the most amazing logo on the face of the earth. It's probably not going to do a huge amount for you.
Right. And I mean, the thing to remember, especially with logos are not a brand. They're a component of a brand, but they are not a brand.
So let's pivot from that. What are some other components of a brand that people should be thinking about, at least in a visual sense? And obviously, there's more than just the visuals. There's the messaging, the language, but we're talking visuals today.
So assuming that all of the strategy stuff has happened, because that should be happening first, the other things that you want to think about once you have the strategy in place, you can start with colors. So there's a lot of writing out there on color psychology. So you want to take some time thinking about, well, what colors would resonate well with my audience? What are going to communicate the right things? Harkening back to financial services, because that's the industry that we service. You see a lot of blue and greens. And the reason for that is green is seen as a very calming, tranquil color. Blue is
growth also, positive
growth.
Returns, all those things.
Right. But that actually brings up another good point. So green has a connotation with money in North America, not so other places. So you also want to keep in mind context, especially when you're thinking about color.
And cultural context. And is your brand going to be an international brand? Is it a national brand? Is it going to be unique? Because even there's some states that they love their football team and whatever the color of that football team is. And is that going to resonate or not resonate?
Exactly. So beyond color, you also want to think about imagery. Unless you have the budget or the, just talent, you're an amateur or professional photographer to go out and do your own photo shoots. Stock photography is just going to be a part of your life. And there are many great services out there that you can go and find images that will work for your brand. What you want to keep in mind is, you want to select imagery that feels inclusive, that can resonate with anyone that you may be approaching as a client. And also that stock photography is just that, it's stock. Anyone can go out there and buy it. So ideally what you want to be able to do is either engage with a graphic designer or, through your own, any other means, and tweak it, manipulate it, whether it be photography, whether it be a graphic. You don't just want to purchase it and use it as is. You want to tweak it. You want to adjust
Not off the
colors,
shelf.
et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, we have a number of solutions here, and we've given each of them their own color palette. And Mike will take imagery for the brochures for that particular solution and give it that hue of that color, whether it's green or blue, and then often add some extra graphic treatments to further identify it with that particular solution.
Right.
And so you take something that is kind of stock and off the shelf, but through just a little bit of graphic design wizardry, you make it something that is absolutely unique to us.
Right. You want to make it feel like a part of your brand. You want it to convey your value and not just be something that you take off the shelf. Because I even see that with some very large banks. Like TD is notorious for just taking stock photography and using it as is. But you will also see it used elsewhere, and it's kind of like a way. It can get very confusing, especially if there's people in it, because you associate that face with another brand.
And you ideally with your imagery, you want to be able to tell a story about it and why you picked that. For some of our solutions and for Symmetry itself, we use reflections, so that we'll often have images that are either reflected in water or in glass or in mirrors, because of course that's the idea of symmetry. That is, reflection is one form of symmetry. For our sister firm Apello, when we did some rebranding for them, we picked imagery that was taken either at sunset or sunrise.
Cool.
Part of that is because Apello's color is orange, so that orange color of the light worked in very well. But it was also the sense of that Apello serves people who are starting out in life, kind of at the dawn of their financial life, or they're servicing people who are thinking about retirement or in retirement, and that's more sort of at the sunset of your financial life. Yes. And so it was kind of covering that whole day of your financial life with these images that also happened to be, because that's when the light is most beautiful, very appealing.
Yes.
And we work with an advisor out of Pittsburgh who uses imagery. Granted, his son does take the images, but he uses imagery from around town, from around the area that he's in, that his office is in, so he can relate to the clients as they're going to his site. They're going to see things and relate to the area. So, while Pittsburgh is a generic town, he's taken it a step, further.
And made it look very, very nice.
It does. It's very appealing.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up part one of the Evidence-Based Marketer. We will continue the conversation with Mike in our next episode. Find out more about us and look at other episodes and watch other episodes, listen to other episodes at theevidencebasedmarketer.com. Thank you so much.
Symmetry Partners, LLC is an investment advisory firm registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. The firm only transacts business in states where it is properly registered, excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration of an investment advisor does not imply any specific level of skill or training and does not constitute an endorsement of the firm by the Commission. No one should assume that future performance of any specific investment strategy, product, or non-investment related content made reference to directly or indirectly in this material will be profitable. As with any investment strategy, there is the possibility of profitability as well as loss. Due to various factors, including changing market conditions and/or applicable laws, the content may not be reflective of current opinions or positions. Please note the material is provided for educational and background use only. Moreover, you should not assume that any discussion or information contained in this material serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice. Please note that nothing either stated or implied on this podcast is intended to be compliance or legal advice regarding your marketing program.